3 years ago, the massive starship UES Prometheus cut through the darkness of space like a silver arrow. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main view screen. His ship was humanity's greatest achievement, 2 kilometers of gleaming metal packed with quantum computers, plasma cannons, and exploration equipment that had taken Earth's best minds 20 years to develop. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system," announced Navigation Officer Kim So-ra, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "All systems showing green across the board." Lee Hyun nodded, feeling pride swell in his chest. 200 of Earth's finest were aboard his ship. Scientists who had revolutionized physics, engineers who could repair a fusion reactor blindfolded, and soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were humanity's ambassadors to the unknown, carrying the hopes of 8 billion people back home. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace with a brilliant flash. Before them stretched an alien solar system, with 3 purple suns casting strange shadows across floating asteroids the size of small moons. Chief Science Officer Park Min-jung immediately began scanning, her excitement obvious as data streamed across her screens. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the 4th planet," she called out. "Something down there is definitely artificial. This could be the discovery we've been looking for." For months they explored that mysterious world. Ancient ruins covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, creatures that phased in and out of reality like living ghosts. The crew worked around the clock, documenting everything, sending regular reports back to Earth through quantum communication arrays. Then came the day everything changed. Chief Engineer Yoon Tae-min was examining a crystalline structure deep in an alien temple when reality itself seemed to crack around him. Space twisted like water, colors that had no names bleeding through the air. The last transmission, Earth, received was Lee Hyun's voice, calm but tense. "Command, we're experiencing some kind of dimensional anomaly. The ship is being pulled into... I don't know what this is. We're going to try to static." Then nothing. Back on Earth, Admiral Ko Jung-ho paced the command center for weeks, staring at the silent communication arrays. The Prometheus had simply vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, no trace of the most advanced starship humanity had ever built. Deep space telescopes found nothing. Rescue ships sent to Kepler 442 discovered only empty ruins and strange energy readings that made their instruments malfunction. The alien members of the Galactic Council barely bothered to hide their amusement. In the crystal palaces of the Nexari homeworld, their queen's musical laughter echoed through chambers carved from living diamond. "The young mammals flew too close to forces beyond their understanding," she sang to her courtiers, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. On the swamp world of Vorthak Prime, the reptilian overlords gathered in their smoke-filled war rooms. General Krexter, his scales scarred from 1,000 battles, hissed with satisfaction. Another upstart species learns their place. Perhaps now the humans will stop pretending they belong among the stars. His forked tongue tasted the air, savoring what he saw as humanity's inevitable humiliation. Even the wise Quillen, beings of pure energy who rarely spoke of other species, whispered among themselves in frequencies only they could hear. The humans had reached too far, too fast. It was the way of young civilizations, ambition without wisdom, courage without caution. Commander Park Jin-woo of the Earth Defense Fleet refused to give up. He led search mission after search mission, his grey hair turning white from stress as months stretched into a year. His crews scanned every asteroid, every gas cloud, every anomaly in 100 light-year radius. They found ancient shipwrecks from civilizations that had fallen before humanity learned to make fire. They discovered new forms of spaceborne life that fed on starlight itself. But of the Prometheus and her crew there was no sign. "Sir, we have to face reality," his aide, Lieutenant Commander Shin Yu-jin, finally said during one late-night planning session. The young officer's uniform was wrinkled, her eyes red from staring at star charts for 18 hours straight. "They're gone. We've looked everywhere twice over." Park Jin-woo slammed his fist on the metal table, the sound echoing through the empty briefing room. 200 people don't just disappear. My brother was on that ship. Captain Lee's daughter. Just started school. We don't abandon our own. But eventually even Earth's resources had limits. The Galactic Council began pressuring humanity to stop their disruptive search efforts. Trade agreements were threatened. Border patrols were increased around human space. The message was clear: accept your loss and move on. 1 year and 3 months after the disappearance, Earth Command held a memorial service. Families gathered in the Great Cathedral of New Geneva, where holographic images of the missing crew members flickered like ghosts above the altar. Children asked where their parents had gone. Spouses wept for partners who would never come home. The galaxy moved on. Humanity had learned their lesson, or so everyone thought. The youngest species in known space had reached too far and paid the price. Their most advanced ship was gone, along with their best and brightest. The other civilizations returned to their ancient games of politics and power, confident that the upstart humans would never again challenge the natural order of things. They were wrong. The alarm klaxons screamed through the cramped bridge of the patrol vessel, Guardian. As Lieutenant Commander Kim Soo-jin nearly spilled her coffee all over the control console. Her fingers flew across the scanner displays, checking and rechecking the impossible readings flooding her screens. The coffee forgotten, she stared at the massive energy signature that had just appeared at the edge of human space. "Ma'am, you need to see this," called out sensor operator Lee Dongwoo, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. "The computer is saying it's the Prometheus, but that's impossible. The ship's been gone for 3 years. Kim Soo-jin pushed herself out of her captain's chair and floated over to the main scanner station in the low gravity of the patrol ship. What she saw made her heart stop. There, hanging in space like a silver ghost, was the UES Prometheus, exactly as it had looked the day it vanished. Every antenna was in place, every hull plate perfect, every running light blinking in the familiar pattern she remembered from the Academy training videos. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," she ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. "And get me a direct line to Earth Command. They're going to want to hear about this immediately." Communications Officer Park Hae-won's face went pale as she worked her console. "Commander, I'm picking up broadcasts from the Prometheus on all frequencies. They're requesting immediate contact with Earth Command and they're asking for permission to return home." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Kim Soo-jin felt goosebumps rise on her arms as she stared at the impossible ship floating in the darkness. The Prometheus looked exactly as it had 3 years ago, but her instruments were telling a completely different story. "What are the energy readings showing?" she asked Lee Dongwoo, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. The young sensor operator's hands shook as he pointed to his displays. "Ma'am, the power output from that ship is off the charts. It's generating more energy than our entire fleet combined. And the hull composition. The computer keeps saying unknown material for every scan we run." Kim Soo-jin moved to the tactical station, where Weapons Officer Cho Min-ho was running his own analysis. His face was white as he looked up at her. "Commander, that ship is generating gravitational waves, not the tiny ones we detect from neutron stars. I mean massive controlled gravitational distortions. According to our physics, that should be impossible for anything smaller than a space station." Through the main view screen, the Prometheus hung in space like a beautiful nightmare. Its hull gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Strange patterns flickered across its surface, symbols that hurt to look at directly, geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. "Prepare a boarding shuttle," Kim Soo-jin ordered, her training overriding her fear. "Full environmental suits and recording equipment. Whatever happened to that ship, Earth Command is going to want every detail." 20 minutes later, Kim Soo-jin found herself floating through the docking tube toward the Prometheus, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her helmet. Behind her, Marine Sergeant Young Woo-sung and Engineer Specialist Yoon Ji-hai followed, their weapon scanners and analysis equipment ready. The moment they stepped through the airlock, Kim Soo-jin knew something fundamental had changed. The air itself felt different, charged with energy that made her skin tingle. The familiar corridors of the Prometheus looked the same, yet somehow more real than reality. Colors seemed brighter, edges sharper, as if the ship existed in higher definition than the rest of the universe. "Atmospheric readings are normal," reported Yoon-ji-hee, though her voice sounded puzzled. "But there's some kind of energy field permeating everything. It's like the ship is alive." They made their way toward the bridge, their footsteps echoing strangely in the corridors. As they walked, Kim Soo-jin noticed crew members moving about their duties, but they moved with an eerie calm, as if 3 years of disappearance was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Commander Kim," came a familiar voice. Captain Lee. Hyun appeared around a corner, looking exactly as he had 3 years ago. Not a day older, not a hair out of place, wearing the same uniform he'd worn when the ship vanished. Behind him walked Chief Engineer Yoon Tae-min and Science Officer Park Min-jung, both smiling with the same unsettling serenity. "Captain Lee," Kim Soo-jin managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where have you been? The entire galaxy has been searching for you." Lee Hyun's smile was warm but somehow otherworldly. "We've been learning, Commander. Learning things that will change everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. We found something out there, or perhaps it found us." As he spoke, the walls around them began to shimmer, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries that existed between the spaces of normal reality. Park Min-jung stepped forward, her eyes reflecting light that seemed to come from within. "We've been to the place between dimensions," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made Kim Soo-jin's bones vibrate. "We've met beings older than stars, and they've shared their knowledge with us. Humanity is about to take its next evolutionary step." Sergeant Young Woo-sung's weapon scanner began beeping frantically. The readings showed energy levels that should have been lethal, yet everyone on the ship seemed perfectly healthy. His hands trembled as he looked at the impossible data streaming across his display. "Ma'am," he whispered to Kim Soo-jin through their private comm channel, "my equipment is detecting quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist. It's like the ship exists in multiple dimensions at once." Through the corridors of the Prometheus, more crew members appeared, all wearing the same calm expressions, all moving with the same fluid grace that seemed to defy the ship's artificial gravity. They nodded politely to the boarding party, as if visitors from the normal universe were an everyday occurrence. Captain Lee Hyun gestured toward the bridge. "Come, Commander, let us show you what we've discovered. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity has capabilities no one ever imagined." The sterile white walls of Lunar Station's main briefing chamber had never witnessed anything like this. Captain Lee Hyun stood at the center of the room, facing a semicircle of the most powerful beings in known space. Earth's top admirals sat rigid in their blue uniforms, while alien council representatives loomed in their specialized environmental suits. The crystalline Nexari Queen crackling with inner light, the massive reptilian General Krextor of the Vorthak, and the shimmering energy form of Elder Quillan Zephyros. Admiral Ko Jung-ho leaned forward, his weathered face lined with 3 years of sleepless nights. "Captain, your ship vanished for 3 years. 3 years of searching, of families mourning, of the galaxy writing us off as failures. Now you return looking like you've been on a pleasure cruise. We need answers." Lee Hyun nodded slowly, his eyes holding depths that hadn't been there before. His disappearance. When he spoke, his voice carried strange harmonics that made everyone in the room feel slightly dizzy. "We didn't disappear into normal space, Admiral. We fell through what we now call the Fold, a pocket dimension that exists between the layers of reality. Think of our universe as a book, and we slipped between the pages into a place where the rules of physics don't just bend, they dance." The T. Nexari Queen's crystalline form pulsed with skeptical light patterns. Her voice rang like wind chimes in a storm. "Impossible. Our scientists have mapped 11 dimensions. There are no pocket realities." Dr. Choi Min-ah stepped forward, her tablet displaying equations that seemed to shift and move on the screen. The ship's chief physicist looked the same as she had 3 years ago, but her eyes now held knowledge that made quantum mechanics look like basic arithmetic. "With respect, Your Majesty, your science is limited by your assumptions," she said, calmly. "Watch this." She pressed a control on her tablet, and suddenly the air in the room began to shimmer. A three-dimensional hologram appeared, showing the familiar Kepler 442 system. But as they watched, the image twisted, revealing layers upon layers of reality existing in the same space. We were examining alien ruins on the fourth planet when the dimensional barrier weakened, Dr. Choi explained. Our ship was pulled through a crack in space-time itself, but instead of being destroyed, we found ourselves in a realm where thought becomes reality, where consciousness shapes matter. General Krextor's reptilian features twisted into a sneer. Fairy tales? Show us proof beyond pretty light shows. Engineer Kang Wubin smiled and reached into what appeared to be empty air. His hand seemed to push through an invisible barrier, and when he pulled it back, he held a perfect sphere of what looked like liquid starlight. The orb pulsed with inner fire, casting impossible shadows that moved independently of the light. Source? This is crystallized time, Wubin explained as gasps echoed through the chamber. In the fold, we learned that time isn't a river flowing in one direction. It's an ocean you can swim through. The beings who live there taught us to sculpt it like clay. The assembled officials and aliens stared at the impossible object. Sensor readings from around the room went haywire as the crystallized time warped local space-time, making clocks run backward and forward simultaneously. Captain Lee Hyun continued his story, his words painting pictures of a realm beyond imagination. The entities that inhabit the fold aren't physical beings like us. They're pure consciousness, thoughts that became so powerful they no longer needed bodies. They've been watching our universe for millions of years, observing species rise and fall like waves on a beach. Navigation Officer Kim So-ra stepped forward, her uniform somehow seeming to be made of woven starlight. They call themselves the architects. They've seen countless civilizations discover space travel, form alliances, build great empires. But most species reach a point where they stop growing, stop questioning, stop dreaming of impossible things. The Vorthak reached that point 50,000 years ago, she continued, ignoring General Krextor's furious hiss. The Nexari crystallized their thinking 10,000 years back. Even the wise Quillen have remained unchanged for millennia. You all became static. Elder Quillen Zephyros's energy form flickered with what might have been concern. If what you claim is true, why would these architects choose humanity? Your species has barely begun to explore the galaxy. Chief Science Officer Park Min-jung laughed, and the sound somehow contained music from instruments that didn't exist. That's exactly why they chose us. We're still children, still asking what if and why not, when everyone else has decided. The answers. They told us that most species develop wisdom before wonder, caution before curiosity. But humans, we stayed curious. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show humanity's brief but explosive expansion into space. Ships launching before they were fully tested, colonies established on worlds others deemed impossible to inhabit, scientists pushing theories beyond their breaking points. They said we reminded them of themselves, back when they were young, and foolish enough to believe anything was possible, Park Min-jung continued. So they offered to teach us, not just technology, but ways of thinking that transcend the physical universe. The room fell silent, except for the humming of life support systems and the occasional crackle from the Nexari Queen's crystalline form. Engineer Kang Wubin set the sphere of crystallized time on the conference table, where it continued to pulse with inner light. They shared everything, he said quietly. How to fold space like origami, how to convert thought into matter, how to step between dimensions like walking through doorways. But most importantly, they taught us to see reality not as a set of unchangeable laws, but as a canvas waiting for bold artists. Admiral Ko Jung-ho's hands shook as he reached toward the impossible sphere, then pulled back. How many of your crew were changed by this experience? All of us, Captain Lee Hyun replied simply, but we're still human. We still love, still dream, still make mistakes. We're just no longer limited by what others consider possible. General Krextor's scales bristled with barely contained rage. His species had ruled their sector through military might for 10,000 years, and now these upstart mammals claimed to possess powers beyond Vorthak comprehension. Prove it, he snarled. Show us these impossible abilities you claim to possess. Captain Li Hyun smiled, and for just a moment, his form seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Very well, General. But I warn you, once you see what humanity has become, the galaxy will never look the same again. The Nexari Queen's light patterns shifted to what those familiar with her species recognized as deep unease. The Quillan Elder's energy form flickered like a candle in the wind. Even the human admirals looked pale as they realized their species had fundamentally changed. The age of humanity's childhood was over. The tension in Lunar Station's main briefing chamber could have been cut with a plasma blade. Council Representative Vextar, the most feared Vorthak general in their empire, rose from his environmental suit like a nightmare made of scales and fury. His yellow eyes burned with 10,000 years of military pride as he pointed a clawed finger at Captain Li Hyun. "Enough of these children's stories," Vextar snarled, his forked tongue tasting the air for weakness. "Your species crawled from mud while mine conquered star systems. Show us proof of these impossible powers, or admit you're nothing but dreamers with delusions of grandeur." The other alien representatives nodded in agreement. The crystalline Nexari Queen's inner light pulsed with skeptical patterns, while Elder Quillan Zephyros's energy form flickered with what could only be described as cosmic amusement. They had seen species make grand claims before, usually right, before those species learned their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Captain Li Hyun's expression remained calm, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Very well, Representative, but remember, you asked for this demonstration." He touched a small device on his wrist, and his voice carried across dimensions to the UES Prometheus, floating in Lunar's orbital space. "All crew, prepare for full capability demonstration. Show our guests what humanity has learned." Through the massive observation windows of the briefing chamber, everyone could see the Prometheus, hanging in space like a silver needle against the stars. Admiral Ko Jung-ho activated the room's external cameras, projecting a close-up view of the ship onto the main display screen. "Pilot Yoon Hairin, engage dimensional phase drive," Li Hyun commanded through his communicator. What happened next made every alien in the room question everything they thought they knew about physics. The Prometheus began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Its solid metal hull became translucent, then ghost-like, as if the ship was slowly fading from reality itself. "Impossible," whispered the Nexari Queen, her crystalline form crackling with disbelief. "Matter cannot exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously." To test the phase drive, Lunar Station's automated defense grid activated, sending streams of plasma fire directly at the Prometheus. The weapons, blasts, each one powerful enough to vaporize a small asteroid, passed completely through the ship's hull as if it wasn't there. The energy beams continued into empty space, while the Prometheus remained unharmed, existing somewhere between dimensions. General Krextor's reptilian jaw dropped open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. His species had perfected warfare, when humans were still discovering fire, yet they had never seen technology that could make a ship untouchable. "Phase drive disengaged," came pilot Yoon Hairin's voice over the communicator. The Prometheus solidified back into normal space-time, its hull gleaming as if nothing had happened, but the demonstration was far from over. Navigator Song Taiho's voice echoed through the chamber next. "Beginning matter generation sequence." Through the viewing windows they watched as empty space near the Prometheus began to sparkle with points of light. The lights grew brighter, spinning and weaving together, until they formed perfect geometric shapes, crystalline structures more beautiful than anything found in nature. But these weren't carved from existing materials. Song Taiho was creating matter from pure energy, turning the vacuum of space into solid objects through willpower and dimensional manipulation. Each of those crystals is composed of elements that don't exist on the periodic table, Dr. Choi Minna explained calmly. "We're not rearranging existing atoms, we're crafting new forms of matter from the quantum foam itself." Elder Quillan Zephyros's energy form pulsed rapidly, the equivalent of hyperventilation for his species. "This violates the conservation of mass and energy. It's fundamentally impossible." Only if you limit yourself to three-dimensional thinking, Dr. Choi replied with a gentle smile. The Fold taught us that energy and matter are just different expressions of consciousness. Change your perspective, and you can change reality. The next demonstration left even the humans in the room speechless. Communications Officer Bae Yunar's voice came through the speakers with crystalline clarity. Establishing instantaneous communication with Deep Space Probe Horizon in the Andromeda Galaxy. Distance, 2.5 million light-years. Every scientist in the chamber knew this was impossible. Even quantum entanglement had limits, and no known technology could communicate across galactic distances instantly. Yet clear as day, they heard the automated voice of Probe Horizon responding from another galaxy entirely, its signals arriving without the slightest delay. "How are you bypassing the speed of light?" demanded the Nexari Queen, her entire crystalline form now blazing with confused light patterns. "We're not bypassing it," Bae Yunar explained from the Prometheus. "We're communicating through dimensions where distance has no meaning. The Fold connects all points in space simultaneously." But the final demonstration was what truly shattered the aliens' worldview. Communications Officer Bae Yunar continued her impossible work, her voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate with reality itself. "Reaching across dimensional barriers now," she announced, "contacting our benefactors in the Fold." The air in the briefing chamber began to vibrate, then sing with frequencies that made everyone's bones hum. Reality twisted like water, and through the distortion came something that defied description. Beings of pure light and thought began to manifest, not physically, but as impressions of vast intelligence that had transcended the need for bodies eons ago. The architects appeared as shifting patterns of luminescence that somehow conveyed emotions and concepts directly into the minds of everyone present. They acknowledged the assembled aliens with what could only be described as polite indifference, the way an adult might glance at children playing in a sandbox. One of the entities communicated directly with the gathering, its thoughts bypassing language entirely. The message was clear. These ancient beings had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and most species eventually reached a point where they stopped growing, stopped questioning, stopped reaching for the impossible. "Humanity amuses us," the concept flowed through their minds. "They ask why not when others ask why. This curiosity makes them worthy of knowledge we have withheld from more advanced species." Representative Vextar's proud military bearing crumbled completely. His clawed hands shook as he stared at beings older than his entire civilization, beings who had judged his mighty Vorthak empire and found it wanting. These humans, barely out of their solar system, had impressed entities that his species couldn't even comprehend. "Your people have ruled through strength for 10,000 years, another architect communicated to Vextar. "But strength without growth becomes stagnation. These young humans still dream of becoming more than they are. That is why we chose them." The manifestation faded, leaving the briefing chamber in stunned silence. The crystalline Nexari Queen's light patterns had dimmed. To barely a flicker, Elder Quillan Zephyros's energy form hung motionless, overwhelmed by the realization that his supposedly enlightened species had been surpassed by newcomers. Captain Lee Hyun looked around the room at the shaken alien representatives. The architects offered to teach any species willing to abandon their preconceptions and embrace the unknown. Unfortunately, most civilizations are too set in their ways to accept such gifts. Admiral Ko Jung-ho found his voice first among the humans. "Captain, what does this mean for humanity's place in the galaxy?" Lee Hyun smiled, and for a moment his form seemed to flicker between dimensions. "It means, Admiral, that the galaxy is about to discover that underestimating humanity was the biggest mistake anyone could make." Through the viewing windows, the Prometheus hung in space surrounded by the impossible crystalline structures it had created from nothing. The ship pulsed with energies that bent space-time around it, a testament to humanity's transformation from a minor species into something that transcended the physical universe itself. The balance of galactic power had just shifted forever. 6 months after the demonstration at Lunar Station, the galaxy was a completely different place. The news of humanity's transformation had spread like wildfire through every star system. every trading post, every alien council chamber. Species that had ruled for millennia suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders at the young. Mammals who had somehow leapfrogged millions of years of evolution in just 3 years. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, humanity's first dimensional research station. The massive structure existed partially in normal space and partially in the fold, its crystalline spires twisting through dimensions. That older species couldn't even perceive. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he watched human ships phase in and out of reality like ghosts dancing between worlds. The UES Horizon materialized nearby, its hull shimmering with the same otherworldly energy that now powered all human vessels. Captain Kim Ji-won's ship had just returned from a scouting mission to the Andromeda Galaxy, a journey that should have taken millions of years but had been completed in mere hours by stepping through folded space. "Sir, incoming priority transmission." "From Earth Command," announced Communications Officer Lee Soo-jin, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensions. Like all humans who had learned to interface with fold technology, her consciousness now operated on frequencies that made traditional communication seem primitive. Admiral Park Sung-ho's hologram flickered to life in the station's command center. His image was crystal clear despite being transmitted instantly across half the galaxy. "Captain Lee, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Kethmore Empire is mobilizing their entire war fleet." The Kethmore were a species of insectoid, warriors who had conquered dozens of star systems through pure military might. Their ships were living creatures, biomechanical nightmares that could heal battle damage and adapt to any weapon used against them. For 1,000 years, they had been the galaxy's most feared military force. "What's their target?" Lee Hyun asked, though he already suspected the answer. "New Terra Colony. They're calling it a preemptive strike to prevent humanity from becoming too powerful. Intelligence reports suggest they've formed an alliance with the Vorthak remnants and several other species. They plan to wipe us out before we can spread our dimensional technology further." Through the station's sensors, Lee Hyun could feel the ripples of fear spreading across the galaxy. The Nexari had withdrawn into their crystal cities, terrified that humanity might decide they were no longer useful. The merchant guilds were paralyzed, unsure whether to continue trading with humans or risk being associated with the new dominant power. Chief Engineer Kang Woo-bin approached with his latest report, his tablet displaying data that would have been impossible to collect just months earlier. "Captain, 12 more of our exploration vessels have successfully established contact with the Fold entities. The architects are teaching them about pocket universes we can create and control." "How many ships do we have with full-dimensional capabilities now?" Lee Hyun asked. "Over 300, with more being upgraded every day. The shipyards at Mars are producing vessels that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our new dreadnoughts can phase through enemy fire, create matter weapons from pure energy, and travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly." The sound of spatial distortion filled the observation deck as another human ship materialized nearby. The UES Defiance dropped out of dimensional fold space, its hull crackling with energies that bent light around it. Captain Yoon Hae-jin's vessel had been monitoring the Kethmore fleet movements, using sensors that could observe events across multiple timelines simultaneously. "Captain Lee," Hae-jin's voice came through the quantum communicator, "the Kethmore war swarm is massive. Over 10,000 bioships, all equipped with their latest evolution chambers. They're planning to hit New Terra in 72 hours. But Lee Hyun wasn't worried. Humanity had learned more than just technology from the architects. They had learned to think beyond the limitations that trapped other species. While the Kethmore planned conventional warfare, humans had transcended the very concept of conventional anything. "Relay this message to all human vessels," Lee Hyun commanded. "Operation Paradigm Shift is now active. Show the galaxy what we've truly learned." Across human space, captains who had been transformed by their contact with the Fold began implementing strategies that would have been considered fantasy just months earlier. The UES Quantum Storm phased into the space above the Kethmore homeworld and began broadcasting dimensional frequencies that caused their bioships to malfunction on a genetic level. Meanwhile, the UES Infinity's Edge created temporary pocket dimensions around entire Kethmore battle groups, trapping them in spaces where time moved at different rates. The alien warriors found themselves aging decades in minutes, while their weapons fired in slow motion. But the most devastating demonstration came from the UES Dreamweaver, commanded by Captain Park Min-jung. Her ship didn't attack the Kethmore fleet at all. Instead, it reached through dimensional barriers and began showing the insectoid warriors visions of what humanity had learned, realities where consciousness shaped matter, where thought became reality, where species could evolve beyond the need for war. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The Kethmore, who had known only conquest and battle for millennia, suddenly saw possibilities they had never imagined. Their bioships began transforming, evolving beyond their programmed aggression as their pilots' minds expanded to encompass concepts that transcended violence. Within hours, the mighty Kethmore war fleet had surrendered, not out of defeat, but out of awe. Their warrior queen, speaking through quantum channels that humanity had taught them to access, requested not conquest, but partnership in exploring the infinite possibilities that the Fold offered. On Nexus Prime, Li Hyun watched as reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The Vorthak had withdrawn their fleets and were requesting diplomatic meetings. The Nexari Queen was offering to share her species' crystalline technology in exchange for access to dimensional manipulation techniques. Even the ancient Quillen were emerging from their energy realms to propose cultural exchanges. "Sir," reported Navigator Song Tae-ho, "we're receiving requests for peaceful contact from over 40 species. They want to learn about the Fold, about transcending physical limitations." Through the station's dimensional sensors, Li Hyun could perceive the galaxy transforming. Fear was giving way to curiosity. Ancient rivalries were dissolving, as species realized they were all children playing in a cosmic sandbox, while true adults, beings like the architects, watched from higher dimensions. Chief Science Officer Dr. Choi Min-ah materialized beside him, her form flickering between normal space and the Fold. "Captain, the architects have approved opening permanent gateways to 17 different pocket dimensions. They say humanity has proven worthy to explore realities that most species never even suspected existed." "And the other races?" Li Hyun asked. "Those willing to abandon their preconceptions and embrace growth will be welcome to learn alongside us. The architects don't play favorites, they simply prefer species that never stop asking questions." In the depths of space, human exploration vessels were already pushing into dimensions where the laws of physics were merely suggestions, where consciousness could sculpt reality like clay, where the impossible was just another word for not yet discovered. The galaxy's oldest civilizations watched in wonder as humanity's newest ships existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, their crews learning to navigate realities that had no names. The age of limitation was over. Humanity had returned from the Fold with more than just technology. They had brought back the most dangerous idea in the universe, that anything was possible for those brave enough to reach for it. And across the galaxy, other species were finally beginning to remember what it felt like to dream. And